Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we're looking at Jesus' warning about being prepared for his coming. And this is right after, if you followed us yesterday, we talked about not worrying. And Jesus talked about where your treasure is, the heart desires of your heart will be. And so he goes. Then he just skips right into this, right? He's continuing talking here, and he's talking about being prepared. And he says in verse 35, we're in Luke 12, verses 35 through 48. In verse 35, he says, "Be dressed for service and keep your lamps burning, as though you were waiting for your master to return from the wedding feast. Then you will be ready to open the door and let him in the moment he arrives. The servants who are ready are and waiting for his return will be rewarded. I tell you the truth, he himself will seat them, put on an apron, and serve them as they sit and eat. He will come in the middle of the night, just before dawn. But whenever he comes, he will reward the servants who are ready. Understand this: if a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would not permit his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected." And so then Peter speaks up and it's like, "Hey, God, Lord, Jesus, is this illustration just for us or is it for everyone?" And he replied, he doesn't really answer him. It's just that same, motive he kind of has. He says, "A faithful, sensible servant is one to whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his other household servants and feeding them. If the master returns and finds that the servant has done a good job, there will be a reward. I tell you the truth, the master will put that servant in charge of all he owns. But what if the servant thinks my master won't be back for a while and he begins beating the other servants, partying and getting drunk? The master will return unannounced, unexpected, and he will cut the servant in pieces and banish him uh, with the unfaithful." That's a harsh warning. And that's a warning to those who he puts in charge of the church, right? Or is in charge of the church or in charge of leadership of the church. You better be prepared, and you better not be being abusive. And I'm telling you, man, that warning, if you're leadership in the church, that should scare you to be who you're supposed to be, because he says that beating other servants, partying, getting drunk, but just basically doing things that you shouldn't be doing as a church leader, right? Not living the lifestyle. You're being abusive to the church members. We've had that happen, right? We see examples of that in the news all the time. Those type of things, right? Look at that warning in verse 46. He's like, "I'm going to arrive unannounced, unexpected, and you're going to be cut the servants in pieces and banish him with the unfaithful." Right? And this is that, you know, basically saying, "Look, you're going to go to hell. I'm going to send you. I'm going to slice you up. And I'm going to send you to hell." Again, this is figurative language, so we need to not take it so serious, or not that we shouldn't take it serious. So literal. It's a figurative way of speaking. Jesus did this a lot, and so, but he's saying, "Look, right? If I come back and you're doing this, you're behaving this way, especially as a church leader, then man, this is a warning for you, and you need to pay attention to this." And so we need to make sure that we are behaving. God has put us, especially those in leadership, right? God has put us in charge of the church, and we need to take that role very seriously and not be involved in things we shouldn't be involved in, or treating our members the way that they should not be treated, and doing things like that. So we need to make sure we pay attention to that. And so he continues in verse 7, "And a servant who knows what the master wants but isn't prepared and doesn't carry out those instructions will be severely punished." Again, another warning. But someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. So there's those who, he's saying, look, there's going to be some who they knew what they were doing. They knew they were being abusive. They knew they were not doing the right things as those in charge of the church, and they're going to be severely punished for it, right? I wouldn't want to be that person. And I try daily, as someone who's been in leadership in the church for a long time, to make sure that I'm very careful with that, because, one, I want to do the right thing, but, I don't want that either. But someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished. Like there's sometimes you just do things in ignorance, right? Or you don't realize, it's still wrong, but and so he's saying they're going to be punished, but only lightly. When someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. So, that's something we need to think about. It. If you're a young Christian and you're striving for church leadership, take these verses seriously, right? Pay attention to them, because this is how we're supposed to behave. And he's saying, look, if I give you much, much is going to be required. All right. So if you're achieving those, and your goal is just, oh, I want to be in a position of authority, or I like the power, so that, then the role's not for you, because that's not what it's about. It's about servants. It's about serving people, and it's about taking care of God's people. And so there's going to be a heavy requirement on you with that, and a lot's going to be entrusted to you, and so much is going to be required from you. So you gotta, you've got to think that all the way through. If that's something you're wanting to get into and do, read those verses and pay very, very, very close attention to them. Okay, so now to the notes. I kind of went off track a little bit on that, but to the notes, right? Jesus repeatedly said that he would leave this world and return. We see that over and over again, and he's talking about here, I'm going to go away, but I'm going to return. He says, I'm going to return. He also said that the kingdom was being prepared for his followers. So, when he does that, he's going to return for the kingdom of his followers. And Christ's return is going to be at an unexpected time, but it's not a trap, right? This is not a trap. It's like, oh, well, it's a gotcha. I'm coming to get you, right? I'm going to wait till you're off guard and then I'm coming, right? No, God doesn't do that. He's not wanting to do that. In fact, as you read the Bible and look through, and you can look at 2 Peter 3:9, you see that he's actually delaying his return in the hopes that everyone, as many people as possible, will come to him. And so we see that. And so before Christ returns, we have a lot of time to live out our beliefs and to reflect Jesus's love as we relate to others. And that's what he's calling us to do. That's what especially those as church leaders, that's what he's calling us to do. And so we need to be ready for the Lord's return and not hypocritical. We don't need to be hypocritical. We need to be sincere, right? Not fearful, but ready. And not worried, but trusting. We just talked about worrying yesterday. Not greedy. We've talked about that with the rich, with the foolish rich guy who's storing up on heaven, right? Or storing up his stuff in earth and not heaven. So don't be greedy and not be lazy. Like, be diligent. We're hardworking. And so that's what he's calling us to do. And so our life, may it be more like Christ, so that when he does come, you're ready to greet him joyfully, right? And that's going to be the thing. We're going to see that, and you're going to see that reaction when Christ returns, right? There's going to be people, man, they're going to be glad to see him. There's going to be a lot of people in the church who are glad to see him, but there may be some who are like, you know what? I hadn't been living my life the way I should. I'm not so happy to see him coming back. I thought I had more time, right? And then the people in the world, obviously, their reaction is going to be, it's going to be a fear, right? Where they're going to be scared because they haven't given their life to Christ. And so Jesus has told us how to live until he comes. He's told us several times, and he continues to tell us how we live. And so while we're doing that, we've got to watch for him. Right? If you're watching for Jesus to return, then that should encourage you to work diligently and obey the commands that he gave us before he left. And so these attitudes, especially for the leaders of the church, which Jesus shifts to here, are necessary. Like, watchful and faithful leaders will be given increased opportunities and responsibilities. We see that. He talks about that, right? But the more resources, talents, and understanding we have, the more we are required to use them efficiently. And so we need to make sure we're doing that. We need to make sure whatever we're doing, the more that's given to us as churches, right? And that's the thing is, we see a lot of different types of churches. We see small churches. We see what we call the mega churches. We see all this, and some, more is given, like more responsibility, like more resources, it seems, and talents is given to some of the larger churches, but more is going to be required of them, right? We're going to see that there's going to be more that's required of them. And then sometimes we have churches that are, because of whatever reason, maybe they're in their area, maybe that's just, that particular ministry that's what God's called them to serve to, right? And they're smaller, so, but they still have their gifts, they still have their talents. It's just not on the same level, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we're serving God and serving God diligently. And so God's not going to hold us responsible for gifts that he hasn't given us. And so that's one thing we've got to take assurance. And it's like, you don't have to, don't compare yourself to the guy down the road. Or if you're a church, right? Don't compare yourself to the church down the road. You're not the church down the road, right? You have been given a set of gifts. They may have a different set of gifts, right? And the same thing on a personal level, right? You can't have all the gifts. And so don't compare yourself to someone who has a different gifting than you. Focus on the gift you do have and be the best at it. And so all of us has been given enough gifts and duty to keep us busy until Jesus returns. And that's the thing we need to focus on, because sometimes, man, we get caught up in the, we talked about Mary and Martha, like last year, like or last week, and some we talked about that today in church. Like some of us are Mary, some of us are Mary, so we like to sit and listen, and then some of us are Marthas. We're just running, running, running constantly all the time, and we need to be a little mixture of both, right? You need to be a little bit of Martha sometimes, and you need to be a little bit of Mary sometimes. And so we need to make sure that, we are using our talents. Don't just be going to the church and leaving, like going, checking the boxes and leaving. All right, that's not what we're called to as Christians. So we need to make sure we're not doing that. You need to be using the talents you have inside the church for the church somehow, right? In whatever context that, like, it looks different. Like for us, right, where we meet in homes, we and stuff like that, it looks a little different than for people who, go to a church building and have, have church building, have church, multiple church services or something like that, right? It looks a little bit differently, but you do need to find your gift and find where you feel God's calling you to serve. And that might take a little while sometimes, but we need to make sure that we are doing that. And so to sum this all up, right? Be prepared for Christ's returns, right? I'm sorry, Christ's return. As Christians a whole, as Jesus starts us out, as Christians as a whole, we need to be ready. We need to be looking for Christ to come, looking for the Mass to come. And then he kind of shifts into, Peter asked about this. Was this for us, right? Just the apostles or your disciples, or is this for everyone? And then he doesn't really answer the question, but he does, in the sense that he's like, look, as servants, as leaders of the church, you need to be extra prepared, because more is going to be required of you, and the more talents, the more you do, the more is going to be given to you, the more is going to be expected out of you. And if you abuse it, then you're going to be, you're going to be severely punished. You're going to suffer more if you don't take care of this than those who don't know. And so we need to make sure that we as Christians are prepared for the return of Christ. Then we need to make sure us who are leaders in the church, or those who are striving to be leaders in the church, understand what our responsibility is and how we're going to be judged as leaders in the church when Christ returns, because we need to take that very, very seriously. As always, I appreciate everyone who watches these and continues to follow along. Excuse me. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do so. And as always, I appreciate you for watching.